This time on Watchers of Tomorrow. Irrelevant! Irrelevant!
Hello and welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow, the sci-fi review and critique show that's decided the only way to prevent war is to be traitor, but not really, because really I'm doing it for my own people, and my circular logic shall not let me actually be helpful. My name is Gepwin. I'm joined as always by my friend and co-host Dr. Izix.
Hi!
And we have another Romulan episode.
Mm-hmm.
The Romulans. They're gonna rom.
The Romulans. They're up to no good, making trouble in the neighborhood. Then my mom got scared. Wait. Never mind.
I'm kind of surprised, given the climate of television throughout these times, that there was never some sort of strange, sitcom-y spin-off show for Star Trek.
Well, we had to wait until Lower Decks, really.
But some kind of here's the comedy civilians living on Earth.
Transported here from Paraguay this morning. I got fresh beets, but we have beets locally and a replicator. Oh, yeah.
I just transported in, and boy, are my arms tired. That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. Oh, no. Jessica's dating a Bolian. You know what that means? She's going to get free haircuts?
There's some kind of stereotype in there.
Yeah.
I don't exactly know what, but
well, we haven't met Mott the Barber yet, so I guess that doesn't make sense.
It's because he's the only Bolian we see for a bit, but there's other Bolians.
Yeah, and, there's the fake Bolian that has hair.
Doing some kind of weird thing about Bolians and their polycules.
Maybe? I guess we'll figure this out later at some point.
Yeah, it'll work itself out. Don't worry. Anyway, this is The Defector, which has nothing to do with sitcoms or Bolians or The Fresh Prince. It does have to do with defecting.
Yes, and not being defective, hopefully.
Yeah. And somebody who kind of misunderstands what the word defecting means.
Because, if you're going to defect, you might as well go all in, right?
Yeah. Also, we've been talking about it off and on, but now we are officially in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. It's no longer acceptable in the 80s. It's now being radical in the 90s.
Yeah. Our decade as millennials.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of when in the 80s we were born, the 90s were our time.
Yes. We got ourselves Salute Your Shorts, and Clarissa Explains It All. And we got some really cool colors and that sort of... vaporwave swoosh thingamajig that you sometimes see in places.
Yeah, that swishy thing that was on all the paper cups.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about the conflict in Serbia there and Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, and we're going to be doing stuff like getting jiggy with it. And, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we didn't have conflict in the 90s. Don't be silly. Conflict was fixed.
Oh, conflict was fixed, and so you had to anything that sounded like conflict was just the ringing down of the Cold War, which has been ended forever.
Yeah, the 90s were a great time. The Cold War ended, and that meant there would be no more world conflicts ever because capitalism had won. We'd fixed racism and we'd fixed sexism. Let's see. Gay people didn't quite exist in the same way yet. We were still mad at gay people, but we couldn't agree if they existed yet, so we didn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and we got to the point where things like AIDS is this is a terrible thing, but we're not just calling it the gay disease anymore. So progress, I guess.
Hooray!
Hooray! It's oh yeah, you can get it from straight interactions too.
Yeah, can you tell living through the 90s jaded me as a child?
Yeah.
Anyway, the thing that we're actually talking about is an episode of television that came out in the early 90s, written by Ronald Moore, who we've talked about a lot because he wrote The Bonding and did story editing and all kinds of other stuff, and then worked on DS9, Voyager, and Battlestar Galactica.
Yep. So moving on.
Yeah, my plan to talk about the writers, because they're like the storytellers who we're actually focusing on, is kind of backfiring because like 3 people wrote this show.
Well, we could always talk about the directors, but I've already we've already touched upon Robert Scherer, so yeah.
All right, guest stars. We've got James Sloyan. I'm going to say Solian.
Sloyan.
Yeah, something with an S and some Y's in there. Anyway, he plays Satal / Admiral Jarok. I'm not doing the whole, oh my god, who is this guy thing, because it makes the script synopsis confusing. So
a little bit.
He's pretending to be a dude. It's a thing. Anyway, he has been in a lot of TV shows as guest stars or reoccurring characters. He was in The New Adventures of Wonder Woman. He was in Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. He was in Quantum Leap. He will appear in Next Generation again as adult Alexander, which is kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. We haven't even seen Alexander yet so far.
Yes.
And then he'll be in Voyager as Voyager as
Jetrel.
Jetrel. Yeah.
In the episode, Jetrel. So the Jetrel, the episode is about a guy who's regretting that building a doomsday device that kind of killed all of Neelix's family.
Yeah, he likes doing these villain characters.
Yes, even Alexander is a villain in some ways.
In that episode, yeah.
Yeah, he's in a lot of other things, and we'll see him again. So,
and then we've got again Andreas Katsulas as Commander Tomahawk.
And I could go on again about how excellent he is in Babylon 5, and but maybe I could mention that he was also in Millennium and A Piece of Eden, The Fugitive, Hunter, Communion, other shows I don't remember or have heard of.
Yeah, he's been a lot of stuff. You'll know him from Babylon 5 because he was one of the main characters on Babylon 5. He also showed up before as Tomahawk. He will show up again as Tomahawk a few times.
The once and future Tomahawk.
He's a really fun reoccurring villain, and it's too bad he didn't take off as like the central antagonist he so clearly should have been.
Yes. Because he's a great actor. He's great at playing these sort of villain roles. And he's, kind of delights in being sort of this, not quite smarmy villain, but like the slimy, I kind of, got you over a barrel sort of character there. And, yeah.
And finally, the guy who shows up a little bit, just a little, is John Hancock playing Admiral Hayden. He's been in a lot of TV shows through the 70s and 80s, like Cheers, Family Ties, Dukes of Hazzard. He was in many movies during the same time period, like Airplane 2 and the 80s Incredible Hulk movie.
I forgot that was a thing.
Yeah, they've made so many Incredible Hulk movies. It's like, we know we can make this into a movie. It's gonna work. One of these days.
The guy gets angry and turns green. Perfect. Yeah. Let's do this again.
Yes. No notes. Big, green, no notes.
He was mad. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. They made a movie?
I mean, probably.
Interesting.
Not heard of it, but, sure, I'd believe it.
He'll show up again as Admiral Hayden again next season, so in The Wounded.
Yeah, like they keep their admirals around, which I appreciate, because they're little weird side characters, but it gives a nice sense of continuity to the whole thing.
Yes, and I guess, he may have gotten a promotion after the whole Bluegill Parasite stuff here, so this is like the new crew of admirals in charge of things here, so the new blood.
Yeah, when they had to kill off their entire senior staff, some new people came in.
Yes. And I guess that also means that's how we got Admiral Densheyev. Well, it's not all great, is it?
So now, the story, there's a thing happen in this episode. There's some stuff and some things and some other things. Yeah. So, we open on Shakespeare. It always takes me a minute when this episode starts because it's just like some dudes out camping in a forest. Which, like, every single time you see Shakespeare in a like movie or play or something, they do not have costume design and sets this good. Yeah. So every time they show like the holodeck Shakespeare. It's like something just seems very wrong here.
It's not theatrical. It's a little too real, really.
Yeah, which is just strange because you don't expect this like old-timey medieval dude huddled in a mud hut to start busting out iambic pentameter.
You seem to be well-formed in your words, sir. What sort of university did you go to? What do you mean university? I'm just a random player here.
Anyway, this is mostly an excuse for Patrick Stewart to do some Shakespeare because he's in some heavy makeup that doesn't really do much to disguise that it's Patrick Stewart doing Shakespeare.
Indeed. Picard's also in the scene, but just kind of mumbling off to the side.
Yeah. Data is playing Henry V in order to explore humanity through Shakespeare, which is sort of weird.
A little bit. I guess, it's good for understanding some dynamics that don't necessarily come up too often, that Shakespeare was like, I'm going to make this like the premise of some portion of my plays here. But, also sometimes Shakespeare's like, what if I had a twin sibling who looked exactly like me, but, it was, we were fraternal twins, so it doesn't totally make sense because we're not identical. Anyway.
I think if you're going to learn about humanity through Shakespeare, it's going to be weird and horny.
A little bit, yeah. But, isn't that life, though?
Yeah. I mean, so if the way that Data is trying to understand humanity and humor, and Picard is just teaching him a bunch of Shakespeare, he basically should be trying to bust out a bunch of puns that only function in archaic English pronunciation.
Indeed. It would be kind of, I guess, amazing if, Data still couldn't tell a joke by the end of the series, but was just constantly punning, just like, but like without really realizing it.
Yeah. Or he just would sometimes bust out one of the weird Shakespeare puns, but like, he wasn't pronouncing it in Old English, so. It's like, oh, looks like we're going to be on shore leave for hours and hours. Why aren't you laughing? No one's laughing. I found that interesting that I listened to a thing a while ago where some people were talking about how they figured out old pronunciation because you can look at stuff in old plays like Shakespeare that was supposed to rhyme or be a pun and doesn't work anymore, which then lets you know how it was meant to be pronounced at the time.
Yes.
Because, it should have rhymed or it should have been a pun, which means that it should have been pronounced the same way as another word that we pronounce similarly now.
Yeah, so you could sort of reconstruct language that way, and there's like a whole science going on in terms of trying to reconstruct how languages evolve and maybe make educated guesses about where things will go, in the future. This sort of thing, sort of informs sort of the evolution of languages in terms of sort of, even, deep, historic sort of, changes, vowel shifts and, consonant, reimaginings, I guess, it's like, all right, these languages, because it has this sound and this sound is clearly an Indo-European language, but, it also has this other thing that was adopted from a different language. And thus we can say that some point around this point in history that these groups must have interacted. And therefore, we need to find other evidence to confirm this. And but we also have motivation to say these Vikings probably ran into someone from Oman. So let's get on that.
I just thought it was fun.
Yeah,
I just thought that was interesting. It's not pertinent to the episode. They try to make it some sort of point later about how Henry V walks through his troops disguised so that he can figure out the people under his command, and then there's a thing later where they try to connect it up with how Picard can't do that because everybody recognizes him. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's not as pertinent to the episode as they want it to be, but they did shove some Shakespeare in here, which is the thing that they wanted to do. They're interrupted, thankfully, by Riker because they've found an unidentified craft in the neutral zone.
Oh, I guess we gotta go complain about something now.
Yeah, we gotta go hey, you're in the neutral zone. That's a ticket violation.
Get off our lawn.
See, this is how they keep getting all of the Romulan ale. Every time they encounter a ship, it's like, this is a ticket. We don't use the same currency or indeed indie currency, so you have to give us all of the Romulan ale you're carrying.
And then we'll let you go. And, don't go back to the neutral zone. Not at all.
So they found a Romulan scout ship that is being pursued by a Romulan warbird, which is like a shuttlecraft being chased by the Enterprise.
So, well, I guess that happens like every once in a while. So
Yeah.
I guess it's not too unusual.
But just like for size comparison and power comparison, so you can get the idea. The scout ship is disabled, but it does drift across the border into Federation territory, and the warbird nopes out so that it doesn't wind up in Federation territory.
I guess they are, they're very urgent about violating the neutral zone, but they're not going to go so far as to violate Federation space, because that'd be like, go from a big no-no to a major no-no.
So they beam on board a Romulan officer who is apparently defecting.
Well, that's weird. Like, this doesn't really happen?
Yeah, this doesn't work. As Picard points out later, a Romulan defector is essentially a contradiction in terms.
It's like you got this sort of super paranoid sort of society going on here. So, if you're paranoid against your own government and your government's paranoid against you, you're going to be even more paranoid about the foreign government over there.
So the Romulan is Sital, apparently a low-level logistics officer, and he is injured, but demands to see the captain before they take care of his injuries because he has information vital to the survival of the Federation.
Oh, cool. This seems weird, though. Like maybe an obvious trap.
Yeah. So apparently Sital has information that the Romulan Empire is planning to set up a base on a planet in the neutral zone to use as a staging point for a full-on invasion.
Well, we should probably keep an eye on that planet then. Thanks. Can we get you debriefed here?
No.
Maybe some coffee.
He wants the Enterprise to go destroy the base before it's too late. The fleet will be fully in place in 2 days. So, go now. Why aren't you going?
Well, also, if they're setting up a base here, that means we could potentially amass our fleet just on our side of the border here near that base, so that if they strike us from that base, we would be prepared for it too.
But you see, the problem is the invisible ships that just go around your entire fleet while you're waiting, and then shoot other things.
Yeah, I guess we haven't figured out gravitic sensor nets that can be deployed in large scale, sort of regions of space to prevent that.
No, they have not.
Drat. Come on, future Star Trek, figure this stuff out.
This is interesting that you can tell that this is still basic World War II naval strategy.
Indeed.
They are setting up a forward operating base to supply ships, etc., and then using that as a staging point to get further out, which is why America was spending so long fighting over those tiny little islands in the Pacific for years, because you need a place for your boats to refuel and restock and get all kinds of other stuff. This doesn't make as much sense in Star Trek when they have ships that essentially have an infinite fuel supply and can make anything they want from energy.
Yes. So, you don't really need a lot of supplies unless there's very specific things that you're going to, run out of over time that you can't just replicate or, pull out your, fusion / antimatter / singularity power for the Romulans. Maybe they're just going to station a lot of spare officers there to run the ships in case they start getting partially exploded.
Yeah, we haven't learned yet. And we'll talk about how much it makes sense when we do. But, Romulan ships don't need any kind of fuel because they are run by black hole.
Yeah. Just a little Hawking radiation. It's fine.
Yeah. So they send Worf and Sital to sickbay. They are understandably dubious of his claims. Geordi is somewhat consoled by the fact that they will get a chance to examine some Romulan technology for once, and then the scout ship explodes.
Oh no, we put it inside our shields earlier. This little antimatter explosion, that's going to irradiate us and stuff, right?
Yeah, it should be bad, but I guess it's a nice, convenient, polite explosion.
Well, I guess that shuttlecraft was just defective.
So in sickbay, Sital admits to setting the self-destruct on his ship because he didn't want his ship to fall into enemy hands. Them going, what enemy hands? You defected. Do you not know what defected means?
Well, I don't have to give away the farm, right? I'm trying to just prevent the war.
So tells Adamant that he is not a traitor. He's just here to prevent a war. Nothing else. He's not going to betray his people. He just doesn't want his people to invade the Federation.
Okay, that's a very specific thing, but this whole thing kind of comes with a lot of strings attached.
He's taken to his quarters where he's angry the computer doesn't understand Romulan units of measure. Which is weird considering they seem to be able to translate the Romulan language entirely except for units of measure.
Well, maybe it's like the Klingons used to use Kelicams, but now they're at this stage they're using meters and things like that too. So maybe there's a weird campaign to basically promote the metric system amongst all species.
Yes, the computers will not recognize anything that is not in metric.
Yes. So, you better get with the program.
He also sits down and checks on a little orange disc that he's got smuggled in his boot.
That looks like a large Mentos.
Yes. So keep him away from the Diet Coke.
Wait, that's a secret plan. He's here to destroy the Enterprise.
So on the bridge, they conclude that there is no unusual activity on the planet that they were supposed to be building a Romulan base on, but maybe they could be hidden by Romulan cloaking technology. Picard receives a communication from Admiral Hayden, Starfleet Command, and he goes, well, we can't talk directly because you're 2 hours away from Starfleet Communications, but this is your problem. Bye.
Yeah, we're just going to let you figure this one out on your own. We'll just go and go with whatever decision you make. So that way it's not my responsibility if you get us all killed.
They say it a lot more diplomatically. It's we advise caution, etc., etc., but we know the decision will fall on you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's I have decided to be unhelpful.
Wait a moment. Is this the admiral that's been trying to get them killed for since the first season?
Maybe. So after the call, Picard calls Worf to this ready room for secret conversations we don't get to see. Geordi and Data are trying to get the sensor data from the scout ship that they got before it exploded and discover the ship's engines were damaged by the Warbird, but then the Warbird slowed down to not overtake the scout ship.
It's a little suspicious, matching it 1 for 1. They slow down, we slow down. So we never quite catch up.
Yeah. Troy and Riker attempt to interrogate Satal for a while. He has exactly one piece of information, and that is all.
Yeah. And anything else you ask him about, he doesn't know, or it's irrelevant, or, it's not important to the reason he's actually here, so don't bother asking. Come on, guys. Really?
They send a probe to the planet. They also get a mysterious communications from some Klingons that Worf runs off to take off screen.
I wonder if, this is something to do with the upcoming Klingon plots in some fashion.
Yeah, probably. It probably has nothing to do with this. They're just discussing the succession of the High Chancellor.
Yeah. Who's not dead yet, but,
Geordi has to explain gut feelings to Data, who winds up sort of getting it, but doesn't really understand, because he's like, how would I follow my gut if I don't have emotions? But that's not exactly what that means. And also, I really hate that later we get, Data just randomly gets to have emotions through a magic microchip, because he definitely is operating on something analogous to emotionality, because he is not making purely logical decisions at any point. Which is good, because usually if you make purely logical decisions, you're going to be wrong 90% of the time.
Yes. And you're going to come to some really awkward conclusions that, are sort of disregarding easy things to assume about the world, or various, ethical considerations as well.
So I know that would be kind of silly, but I kind of wish they did more of the emotions were inside you all along, instead of a magic computer chip that we shove in your brain.
I guess my, quote, fan theory on this here is that, he did develop emotions over time, but to sort of recognize them in himself, that's what the chip did. That it didn't actually, do much to actually change what his functionality was, other than make him aware that he was feeling the whole time.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
They handled it bad in any event.
Yeah.
If you have to fix it in your head, they handled it badly.
Yeah.
So they get the probe data back, and
Like, Data went with the probe?
yeah, and then he came back to report on things. The probe just launches him back, and he doesn't have to breathe. So they never really put Data in a, like, you have to be outside of the ship situation, which is kind of interesting because it'd be just sort of funny to have, like, 4 guys in full environmental suits and Data.
Yes. We're on this dangerous planet here, and Data's, just kind of walking around like nothing's a problem.
Yeah. So they've picked up some surprises from the probe. There's low-level subspace transmissions coming from the planet.
Someone has a ham radio.
Yeah, basically. They're clearly artificial, but they don't detect any ships and they don't detect any bases because for some reason this advanced frickin' sensor probe they send out can detect essentially nothing. It is worse than going to the place and looking out a window. They keep saying stuff like that. Like, why do you even have sensors if they are worse than you, a random person, looking out a window into space?
Yeah, maybe, I guess in terms of, like, the technology involved, there might be something that you can have more sensitive sensors via a larger vessel, sort of like, you doing, interferometry and things like that. Which does make sense, in terms of actual science there. But in terms of the fiction, they don't really explain why the Enterprise's sensors are not basically being duplicated entirely in these probes.
Yeah, we now have probes about this size that can send back, like, full HD pictures of planets. And they're like, we would be able to detect the hidden base on the surface through visual distortion, but the probe can't see it.
Yeah, because we forgot to put a camera on board.
Yeah. Anyway, Data later has a chat with Sentinel and 10 Forward, trying to work out his feelings about him. He talks sadly about how much he's lost his home to try to prevent war, etc. Data takes him to the holodeck to see a recreation of a Valley of Chula on Romulus, which is this weird volcanic-y looking place that every time they show us one of these planets, it, like, does not look like a place life could exist. It's like, this is a barren hellscape. Sentient life could not and did not happen here.
Well, not all planets are going to look, like the middle of the Sahara Desert constantly here. So I will give them some, leeway on that. That this might be a volcanic, hellscape sort of, a valley that's, the lava's all cooled down and solidified, thousands of years ago. But there's not really any good place to make a farm. But you can build a city here all the same.
But where are the plants? People now on Earth live near volcanoes because the plants grow well there.
Yeah, maybe they didn't like the plants and they killed them all with herbicide. Yeah, totally.
Anyway, he's like, I don't live on Romulus anymore. Turn this off.
Yeah, well, he could give a whole, accounting of his experiences in this valley here. This, Chula saga, but that's for a DS9 episode, actually.
Yeah. So he turns off the simulation, then goes, tell Picard that Admiral Jirok is ready to see him.
Wait, he's here too?
Yeah, he smuggled him in on the show. Oh, wait, he was on the damn.
Wait, maybe
there was going to be a whole reveal. Oh, dang it. I shouldn't have blown that up. Anyway, Jirok's identity is confirmed. He was in charge of the massacre at the Norman outposts. He is not very well liked.
So yeah, you murdered a bunch of people. We got to be, like, upset about that. Yeah.
So Picard sees Jirok in his ready room, where the Admiral demands that they go to the planet, but he still won't give them any more information. Picard tells him that he needs to come to terms with being a traitor, or I'm not going to do anything to help you.
It's like, you are a traitor, sir. You were defected. You've done all the things. Insert Picard's speech here.
Yeah. Jirok tells the story about how he has his own kid, and seeing her smile convinced him that they need to stop fighting and give her a better future, etc., etc. Only people who are parents can understand climate change, something or other.
Yes. So Picard, tell me about your kids. Oh, wait.
Yeah. He spent months trying to get High Command to listen to him until he was completely iced out. And then he saw the plans for an invasion and knew he had to do something in order to guarantee his daughter a future, even though she'll only know him as a traitor.
So yeah, this is really a awkward series of events here, but I'm gotta take a moral stand sometime.
Then he goes, okay, fine. I will give you anything you want to know. Total cooperation. I see that I am being weird about half-assing this.
All right, well, I'm going all in here, and make sure you start on into the neutral zone here while I give you all this final information, and it might get out from the ship at some point before we all get killed there, but whatever.
Yeah. So Picard goes, yes, set course for random neutral zone planet. We have full cooperation. So they get there and they find nothing. There's no ships, there's no base, barren planet, nothing here. Low-level substation missions are coming from orbit.
Well, I guess we figured out what's the ham radio situation here. It's just a repeater. It's fine. Let's go.
Yeah. Jarek is confused. He saw the communiques and timetables and et cetera, but they go, hey, maybe they fed you misinformation because they knew you were upset about what the High Command was doing.
You remember that whole Romulan paranoia stuff? Yeah, when I say the Romulan government is paranoid about its own people, I wasn't exaggerating there. It's like, this guy could defect at any moment because he's not with the program 150%.
So they decide to leave, and then 2 warbirds appear and block their path, and they fire on them, but, it's warning shots, because 2 warbirds could have destroyed the ship if they wanted to.
Yeah, we have to have some gloating first, you see.
Then Tomahawk hails them and says, this time it is you who is in the neutral zone.
Look at that. You've been hoisted by your own petards, Picard.
So this is a blatant violation of the treaty that we hold so dear. Oh my god. He's within his rights to attack them if he wants to. So he demands that they surrender and prepare to be taken as prisoners of war and have the Enterprise captured. And Picard goes, well, I would, but are you ready to die?
I hear it might be a good day for it.
Yeah. And Tomahawk goes, that's an empty threat. And then Worf signals Klingon warbirds that have been floating around them in cloak.
Oh, you brought friends.
Bringing the situation to a stalemate. Yeah, and what army? Oh, the Klingon army.
Yeah, they like to fight us, don't they? Huh?
Tomahawk leaves because there's now 4 ships versus 2. They make their way back to the Federation.
Yeah, we'll forget everything happened here, and I guess we can let you take that defector guy with you, I guess.
So they get back and find that Jarok has taken a poison tablet that he had with him, and he did leave a letter to his wife and daughter that they hope someday, if they have brave men like him on both sides of this war, they'll be able to someday deliver. Oh,
that's a good sentiment. And maybe we'll get some letters from a scientist who's working on a wormhole. Some years back from the Romulan side. I hear it contains a bunch of letters from the Starship Voyager.
Yeah, something about that. It's lucky they find so many stable wormholes in Voyager. So the Defector is it's interesting because it's definitely a Cold War episode, and they keep doing Cold War episodes, even though the Cold War has been over for a bit at this point.
Well, I'd say it's not wound down completely, but it's definitely in that denouement sort of period here. The Soviet Union is like, yeah, we got problems. USA, we'll talk to you later, right? and so things were definitely not as stressful as they were even in the early 80s there. So this is still stuff that is culturally relevant at the time. So might as well mine it for ideas for plots and things like that.
It's kind of difficult to know what is the message of this episode. It's don't half-ass being a traitor.
Maybe. Well, I guess, it might be one of those episodes where you don't necessarily need to have a message in order to have a good story. And I'd say this is actually a pretty good story because, you got a complicated character who has, maybe a not so great background in terms of what he's done with regards to, giving peace a chance and all of that. But there's limits even for him in terms of how awful he'll let conflicts go, that, he wants a new way forward, but, he has to come to terms with that means sort of turning against the various things he's been indoctrinated and been living for years, decades, even at this point, because he's an admiral. He's definitely had time to work his way up the ranks. So he's been part of the Romulan military for years and years, how you just, turning your back on that isn't just going to be an instant, switch you flip here. You have to sort of work through it. And if you're kind of on a short timetable in terms of, oh crap, I need to, prevent a war here, you might not have time to, come to terms with everything before you have to jump over and to the other side there. And so, this is sort of an interesting, bit of this guy is trying to work his way through some stuff while also being pressured from all sides to just give us all the information, please. And so, it's an interesting character sort of piece here, I guess.
Yeah, they don't play up the gamesmanship as much as they want to. They keep wanting to have these complicated, like, Cold War, can we trust this guy? What's actually going on sort of episodes. Mm-hmm. And, like, I agree, they did some okay character stuff, and Picard got to give a speech, which is what Picard is good at.
Yes.
They didn't really do a great job of playing up the tension. This episode is not as tense as it should be.
Indeed. I'd say that the enemy was a bit more tense, but I guess having, a repetition of that sort of tension focus might not have served this episode well either. So I guess I'm more forgiving of things on that, because too much tension can make it harder to, I guess, empathize with the characters involved.
Well, you have two things going on here. You have, do you trust this guy? Because you're risking, your entire ship and crew and war if this guy's baiting you. Mm-hmm. And then you have his character arc of, the only way to get these people to trust me is to fully give up everything that I had. Mm-hmm. But we don't get a lot, like the do we trust this guy plot is very background.
Yeah, there are, bits and pieces here, like Geordi talking about, I have a gut feeling about this planet here, the Nelvani 3 there, I believe it was. And, he ends up being wrong about it in the end. Mm-hmm. But he's willing to trust this guy, without much more evidence other than, his word here. But that's also kind of the character that Geordi is, in terms of he is kind of a trusting guy. But, in terms of, making the right decision about what would eventually transpire, he's probably not, someone to be relying on in this situation. And so you can get a little bit of, different sort of perspectives from some of the crew here about what their sort of reaction is to all of this. I would maybe have liked to have more of that. I don't get a whole lot of Riker and Troy other than they're interrogating him, for instance. We get some from Data. We don't really get much from Worf because he's busy talking to the Klingons, I guess. But but I guess that's sort of Worf is not going to trust the Romulan sort of by default sort of thing there, and that's sort of being reflected in. It's like, oh yeah, I'll totally be on a secret mission for you, Picard.
I think that if I think about like my favorite Cold War sort of movie, which is a little silly, but it's not high concept political stuff. The like Hunt for Red October, when you have the high tension, if we get this wrong, we're starting a war sort of things, is a bit more interesting because you get such strong character interaction on both sides of the thing. You understand a lot of why Captain Ramius on the Red October is doing the thing. You understand why his crew is doing this thing. You get a lot of the talking from their side and their perspective, and you get all the American stuff trying to figure out how to do this without it starting a war. Mm-hmm. And you don't get much from Admiral Jarek because he is very isolated in this episode, and they don't really give him a good sounding board character. Yeah, they try with Data a little bit, but it mostly just is him going like, I don't live here anymore. Yeah,
and which is, good, pathos, but, it's not necessarily pathos of the right sort in terms of, helping with that sort of formula.
Which also the characterization fails a little bit there because he has his whole, Romulus is not my home, I can never return. I'm ready to tell you, that I'm actually this high-ranking admiral, etc., etc. But then Picard still has to give him a big motivating speech after that.
Well, I guess some of that is maybe this would be a expected thing. It's like, oh, you've lied to us. I need to make sure that you understand that that's not acceptable anymore. And from Jirok's perspective, Picard not being pissed at him would be weird. Picard in some way has to be performative. He has to give a speech here because that's what's expected in order from the person he's talking to, in order to make sure that they're not being thrown off by things getting awkward in some fashion.
I think, like, character-wise, Jirok's not getting a complete arc because it's being cut into so many pieces so that each Enterprise character can, like, push him a little bit of the way. Mm-hmm. It's not, like, his internal decision-making of, okay, I've been trying to hold on to the idea that maybe I could go home again, but I can't, and now I have to, like, fully commit to the thing. It's, well, I can't go home, so I guess I'll tell you my real name. And then Picard has to go push him more to, like, oh, I'll give you fleet assignments or whatever.
Maybe the best thing for this particular episode would have been to actually make it a two-parter. So we have a little bit more time to breathe, more time to, have those character interactions with the whole crew. And to give a part one, focused entirely on the character stuff, while in part two, it's more about the tension and the building up and the Cold War sort of centric stuff here.
Yeah, I think if it had more time to breathe, it would have been quite a bit better because you don't get a lot of character stuff, and the tension is interesting, but then, like, I understand they needed to finish the episode, but the Klingons do become a bit of a, like, Klingons show up, get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
Which I like. I like that they set it up. They didn't just pull it out of their ass. But it's still a little bit of a, like, man, you've triggered my trap card.
Surprise! But I guess in terms of the larger, plots of Star Trek TNG here, the Klingons being sort of the surprise backup here is actually a very good move, because it kind of sets up some motivations for, some of the Romulan maneuvers that come in the next, few years here. Because, it's like, all right, so it's clear that the, peace treaty / alliance between the Federation and the Klingons is, they are definitely prepared to work together against us. What can we do to maybe put a big wedge in that sort of
we're not going to be able to take on the Klingons and the Federation at the same time.
We sometimes raid them and cause problems and kill Worf's parents, but, if we're actually at full-on war with both of them at the same time, we're going to get screwed. So how do we get one or the other to basically, not come to the call to arms when it happens?
Which is interesting on this, because you have so much strange, like, the political allegory that they wind up with is so interesting on some of this, because this is like, space NATO. Mm-hmm. Because they're not, the Klingons aren't in the Federation. They're just allies. And then they keep picking up and having to work with random allies because it's the only way that they can stand toe-to-toe with the Romulans, because the Romulans are equivalent power to any one of these people, but not all of them.
The Romulans are definitely a major power at this stage. So you got to, since we only have major powers that could work with minor powers, to maybe overcome that sort of strength, you got to be, up for some cooperation here. We have to have our North Galactic Treaty Organization.
Mm-hmm. So the Space NATO part's interesting because you have to introduce tension somewhere. You can't just have and the Federation, and they're all like together and work together and do things together. You have also the close allies who we mostly get along with most of the time.
And then you have situations where, there's a president for life in space Turkey, or, a pro-fascist, president in space Hungary, and, a very, fascist-leaning, president in space USC over there, So, there could be problems.
Which is kind of interesting. We'll talk about it more the further we get into the Klingon stuff, but it's interesting how much they condense all of that into just the Klingons.
Yes.
They're unclear enough with how their government works that we get a lot of the, like, oh no, if this guy gets too powerful, it's going to be space fascism all over again.
Yes. Though I guess the short version of the Klingon government is you got a high council at the chancellor that sort of runs things. They do sort of day-to-day things that, like, both make laws and act as a Supreme Court for, important, like, nobility sort of types of folks in the Empire. And there's these houses that some of them are represented on the council and some of them aren't. And if you get enough allies on the council, you can politicalize your way into being the leader, or you could just stab a guy.
Yeah, it's just kind of hard to like. I understand that's not the kind of show that Star Trek is at this point, which is one of its strengths, because you don't want to get bogged down in too much nitty gritty world building, because it will curtail your ability to do stuff later, because you'll have to deal with whatever you set up before.
Yeah. So if you're going to set up something, make sure you know what you're doing, and make sure that there's a good, reasonable, plot reason for what you're doing right now in order to facilitate it, and be careful about unintended consequences later down the road.
That's just kind of interesting to like. They set up the Klingons so vaguely that like we kind of can understand how their political system works, but like, what do they actually do? They don't seem to be distributing resources or doing much with laws or legal disputes or other things. Like, sometimes they yell at each other in sort of a semi-feudalistic way with the houses, but like they don't really seem to be doing a lot to run day-to-day operations of the Empire.
Well, I guess there's the house system they got going on there is in some ways a federal sort of structure, semi-feudalistic in character, but the house is like run their lands and planets and things like that, and are the effective governors of those sorts of territories. But there's also planetary governors appointed by the council itself. So
yeah, space feudalism.
Yes.
I mean, it's basically, what's really interesting is it's basically it's a space game. It's like Stellaris, because you don't have the time, energy, or bandwidth to be able to, as a single player, run 15 different governments on 15 different planets. So the game just goes like, I don't know, put in a dude.
This guy will take care of all the things, and we'll get some base bonuses, and that's all we really need, right? We need more alloys to build ships.
So the Klingon Empire is just like that. The only reason, interestingly, that we have any particular idea how anything else works, how like Earth works or the Federation works or Romulus works, is because they are so clearly real world allegories.
Yes.
The Federation works the way the United States works, because that's how it's set up and presented. So we can understand that because it's just how the United States works.
So it's easy to project real world things onto things. And
like the Klingons are one of the actual like alien governments. We don't have a government on Earth that works this way.
Yes.
So we have actually no idea how it functions, because we can't put a real world allegory on it, and they're not going to waste all of their time and energy explaining it, which is, I think, a good decision.
Yes. Though, in the end, though, there's apparently some statute of limitations on being able to stab a guy, because otherwise the current chancellor, which we'll meet later, probably would have been stabbed at some point. But,
Anyway, that's not as important. I just think it's interesting, like, there's an interesting moral relativism thing that they bring up in this episode somewhat, on, like, this guy is a complete traitor to his own people. He's possibly a helper and a hero to the Federation, and that's kind of the key to his character arc, is trying to juggle his way between those two things, because he's been raised forever in this, like, the thing that you called the massacre of whatever, we called the campaigns, and I was a glorified hero.
Yeah, and I felt pretty good about that at the time, but yeah, maybe I still do. We'll see.
So, like, the whole defector thing is a very interesting moral standpoint, because, like, to us, whose viewpoint is the Federation, and we're supposed to be siding with them as the main characters of the show, this is good that this guy's doing this, and it's confusing that he doesn't want to help them. But the entire Romulan perspective is this guy's a horrible traitor who deserves to die and is, like, throwing his own people under the bus.
Yes, he is persona non grata. So, if he dies in this whole maneuver here, that's fine.
And they don't go into a lot of moral relativism on some of these, because the show is essentially doing the Beacon on a Hill style politics.
Yes.
because, the Federation isn't always 100% right, but Picard definitely is. The Enterprise is always 100% morally right, as presented by the show.
Yes. Even if later you go, wait a minute.
Yeah, even if later on you're like, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, before we move on to the next portion of the show, shall we talk a little bit about historical defectors at all, or do we not have enough time?
We have a bit. We can do something. We can edit out the other stuff. We rambled non-consequentially for a while,
Well, I guess the main thing I want to say is that it's kind of interesting in terms of like tracking down, like lists from Wikipedia and things like that, how the listed entries are kind of organized in terms of it's like this person's name, what they're involved with which country they're doing it, when they defected, and to who. Like a lot of the defections from the NATO/Western powers and things like that and allies, it's like this. Here's someone who's defected from who was a military officer for the United States. They defected to the People's Republic of China when 1953. So Korean warrior. Okay, so I guess they were involved there and got persuaded to switch sides and things like that. And so you got sort of a rash of folks there. 60s and 70s are like, once again, mostly military types that defected to Sweden, oddly enough, because, they didn't want to be involved in the whole Vietnam thing there.
We'll be neutral. Off we go.
Yeah. So we'll do that sort of thing here. A few to, very specific situations. There's some folks that defected from Japan to North Korea 1970, but when you sort of look up what their organization that they were with beforehand, it's like, oh, this was like a hardcore militant communist faction in Japan, so it kind of makes sense that they would go to North Korea. Like, you guys are already doing what we kind of want to do, be super militarized and communist. Okay, but then you look over to the Eastern powers, the Soviets and China and things like that. Hypothetically, at least, there's not a lot of actual Chinese defections listed on these lists here, but most of them are politicians, some intelligence agents, a lot of journalists, authors, playwrights, and things like that. And there is maybe something to be said about direct persecution of folks in these sorts of artistic / media sort of positions, but it is also interesting in terms of just how these lists have been curated as well. That I do have to wonder, is there being cut out some number of folks that from the from Soviet list that are more militaristic nature, and folks being cut out from the West, the USA and such, that are less militaristic in nature here. And so, but these aren't going to be exhaustive lists, because they're things people have compiled voluntarily, and probably misses tons of folks that you just never hear about, like folks moving from east to west Germany via breaching the Berlin Wall sort of situations there. So there's a lot that's likely missing from the lists, and I do kind of wonder what the nature of those missing elements are.
Yeah, I guess you'd never know. It depends on, it does seem like if you have military defectors, it paints a better picture of your thing than if civilians are defecting, because you're like, oh, we're not taking good enough care of our people. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not to say that they were that the Soviets were being great to folks, their own citizens. There was lots of very direct disappearing people that were critical of the government. People being purged during Stalin's era. Millions and millions of people sent off to Siberia to basically starve to death and get worked to death. All sorts of horrible things like that. There's also plenty of folks that were becoming aware for whatever reason that someone in the KGB or related organizations were going to be doing away with them for whatever reason, and so they're like, yeah, I'm just going to leave, and hopefully you don't actually get to me. Bye.
It's also interesting that in the way that we talk about stuff, especially in the US, when they talk about anybody who was a civilian that did defect to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. They are talked about in such a militant way. They were always a terrible agitator or borderline terrorist.
So, they're horrible people. They're going to get what they deserve by joining the horrible side. And, I will, be happy to point out that the Soviet Union was generally a pretty crappy government. That, having an authoritarian leadership is always a bad time, no matter what economic systems you set up there. So, that's, a good reason at the very basics to dislike the government here. But, some folks are like, yeah, I'm okay with dictatorships because it's justified for this, particular desire of mine to live in a communist society. And like, all right, well, you're going Stalinist here. Good luck, I guess.
Well, now we've got plenty of people going, I'm okay with a dictatorship if it lets me keep living in a capitalist society, so.
Yeah. And, it's just like maybe one of the first things we should do is, be anti-dictatorship. That would maybe solve a lot of our problems. We could maybe, work on figuring out what the best economic system is here and actually implementing it. If we get away from this, fetishism with, having strong leadership sort of stuff there. It might be a good first step here. So, there's a lot of sort of interesting things going on here in terms of the, I guess, narratives of defections from one side to another during the Cold War, as well as the prevalence of, if you defect to Sweden, you're also a traitor.
Yeah, how dare you, those damn neutrals.
Always doing nothing while we are fighting these wars. Yeah. Anyway, that's most of what I wanted to talk about on that.
This was a weird... Sometimes the political episodes wind up without as much to say, which is interesting. Maybe politics isn't actually that interesting.
Maybe it's a lot simpler than people wanted to frame it as.
Well, politics is all trying to get a bunch of people with, contradictory interests to try to agree on things, which this is not particularly about. So,
yeah.
Anyway, we now have to do a thing because, we were depressing for a minute.
Yeah, we're going to negotiate our way to a perfect episode of Star Trek someday.
Yes. So what we get now is the Galaxy's favorite game show.
Woo! Hey everybody, welcome to the Galaxy's favorite game show. We got various contestants here who've been racking up various points, and so it's time to hand out some prizes. The first one to hand out is the To Die is Logical prize, which goes to Admiral Jirok. Because when you've been played at the point of perhaps, kicking off the very thing thought you were preventing, can never really go home again, will never see your family again, etc., there's not a whole lot left. So what do you do? So he decides to take the way out that that ends with him being ended. What does he win, Gapwin?
Jirok wins some damn pictures. It's like, he doesn't even have any photos of his family to, stare at longingly and remember. So the only thing he gets to do is, die. Mm. He could go join. He could go be a military advisor and try to work towards peace, etc., and then maybe be reunited with his family later after Nemesis when, Romulus is almost destroyed by the weird clone dude. But instead he does this because he just didn't have a camera. Romulus doesn't seem to have cameras, as far as I can tell. Never seen a picture from Romulus.
Though the Federation seems to have good scans of their random valleys.
Yeah.
Huh. Weird.
Probes.
Our next prize is the Cold War Strategy Prize, which goes to Tomahawk for making use of the potential defector to get what he wants while confirming suspicions about that very defector. What does he win, Gapwin?
He wins some of his own Klingons. Well, we get that later, but that would be just... I think it would be hilarious with cloaked ships. We need just one scene of, well, I have Klingons. I have Klingons. So I have more Klingons.
Ah, Klingons all the way down. Our final prize today is the Picard speech, which goes to Picard, naturally, for convincing Jirok to go all in on being cooperative, because really, And if he did it for good reasons, he was, in the end, according to Picard's perspective, a traitor to the Roman Empire. He made his choice, sir. And the rest of the speech goes here. What does he win, Gepwin?
He wins Picard's Speech, the licensed card game, which is played somewhat like the Cards Against Humanity style party games, where you get a deck of cards that have snippets of Picard speeches, and then someone draws the thing that you have to convince someone of, and you play out your cards in order of how you want the Picard speech to go, and then whoever is the most convincing Picard speech wins the point.
I would actually like to play this game, Gepwin. Send me a copy too, if you can. And that's all we got here for this week. Feel free to take us away.
Yes, thank you, everybody, for joining us this week on the Galaxy's Favorite Game Show.
So, do you like stuffy planets with mustaches?
Yeah, so many mustaches.
Yeah.
We actually don't get that many mustaches in this show, when you think about it.
Indeed. Maybe because they're saving them all for this one planet.
The planet of the mustache. You've heard of a planet of hats. You ready for the planet of mustaches?
Dun, dun, dun. But yeah, we got a planet that's wanting to join the Federation, it looks like. And but there's something wrong. They got a penal colony on a moon or something like that.
Yeah, something's not right. And it may or may not be a war allegory.
Yes. About soldiers returning home from Vietnam and Rambo.
Yeah, this
one's
going to be difficult. I mean, not difficult because there's so much to talk about, but there's so much to talk about.
Well, don't worry. The episode after that has even more to talk about. So
Yeah, I know. Everything. We're getting into that time. We're getting into that bit.
Yes, things are getting a little heavy here. So, I guess but the most important thing that we do learn in this coming episode is that if you jazzercise right, you can actually get out of transporter beam.
Yes,
or at least mess up its where it's sending you.
Yeah, we have no idea how transporters are supposed to work.
So this totally makes sense.
Yeah, I just hate it. I'm sorry. It's a pet peeve that everyone goes, oh, the transporters are murder machines. Oh, they're actually killing us. They show several times you remain continuously conscious through the entire process.
Mm-hmm.
There is not a weird you are here and then there's a blank space and then you are here. You are conscious through the entire thing.
You are continuous. You are more dead when you're asleep.
Yes. It is not a murder machine. We don't know what it does, but it is not doing that because you would not have that kind of consciousness continuity where you can do stuff in the middle.
Mm-hmm. But we can more focus on the weirdness of that, or maybe more relevant things in the end for the next episode here.
Yeah. Anyway, that's that. Next episode is The Hunted. Someone is being hunted. Maybe it's not who you think.
Dun, dun,
yeah.
dun.
So hard. It's very hard to write
dun.
because there's just the entire last part of the episode is a chase scene. Have you ever tried to write a chase scene in audio?
Kind of.
It sucks.
Actually, but yeah. It's like writing a chase scene in a novel. You gotta be descriptive about some stuff here, and or you just gloss over it.
Yeah.
Whatever one works.
You have to gloss over it. We don't. I can only do I've only got about 30 minutes to get through these things. I can't describe the flowery, dark hallway, the dark forebodingness of the hallway with the light smoke on the floor. Anyway, that's next time. We're being hunted, and we might have to talk about Vietnam.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, breakdancing versus the transporter. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on YouTube facebook.com/Gepwin, and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix, and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Mori's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.